right, welcome everyone. I know some are still filtering in, but we will get started. Welcome to the COPSS NISS Leadership Webinar Series. We're really excited to start our fall semester series of webinars. We've got a few great ones lined up. My name is Natalie Dean. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Biostatistics and Bioinformatics at Emory's Rollins School of Public Health. I'm also a member of the 2022 class of the COPSS Leadership Academy. So as a little background, COPSS is the Committee of Presidents of Statistical Societies, and it's made up of various statistical societies, including ASA, ENAR, WENAR, IMS, Statistical Society of Canada, along with many friends of societies from across the globe. And COPSS bestows many awards each year, including the new COPSS Leadership Academy, recently renamed to the COPSS Emerging Leaders Award. The purpose of this award is to recognize early career statistical scientists who show evidence of and potential for leadership. It also provides a mechanism for us to share our vision of leadership with the field. And from this emerges this webinar series, which is co-organized with COPSS and our wonderful partners at the National Institute of Statistical Sciences, NISS. So these webinars are an opportunity to feature leaders throughout the discipline and invite them to tell their leadership stories and share their insights. An opportunity to celebrate statisticians and data scientists who have achieved great things and who have inspired others in many different ways. So the topic today is leadership in national scientific societies. Of course, there are many different types of professional organizations, and we're most familiar with our societies like ASA, IBS, ENAR, and so on. And these help us stay up to date on the latest research, to connect with our colleagues and support those within our discipline. But there are many other societies that exist that are inherently more cross-disciplinary and spread out beyond many across many different fields. And they're a unique opportunity for us to connect with others and to enhance the reach of statisticians. So we are fortunate today to have two of our own here who have demonstrated great leadership within national scientific societies. So first we have Professor Lance Waller. He is a professor in the Department of Biostatistics and Bioinformatics at Emory's Rollins School of Public Health. He's also my faculty mentor. He was previously at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, University of Minnesota, and has had a long career at Emory, including being chair for a long stint. He is an expert in spatial statistics with a book, wonderful book, Applied Spatial Analysis of Public Health Data. He's a fellow of the ASA, former president of the ENAR. But he's here today because of his role on the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine Committee on Applied and Theoretical Statistics, or CATS. He is co-chair of that committee along with Liz Stewart. Our next expert is Professor Tom Lewis. Professor Lewis has had a long career in biostatistics, with roles at many different institutions, faculty at BU, Harvard School of Public Health, University of Minnesota for a long time, including a role as chair, the RAND Corporation, and then since 2002, he's been at Johns Hopkins University. He has been Professor Emeritus since 2018. Professor Lewis is an expert in biomedical studies and Bayesian methods. He's a fellow of the ASA, AAAS, and former president of ENAR and IBS. And he's demonstrated an extraordinary amount of service to the organization and the field. And he's here because he was chair of the AAAS, the American Academy for the Advancement of Sciences. I hope I got that right. The Section U, the Statistics Section. So the structure of today's event is as follows. Each panelist will have 5 to 10 minutes, as much as they'd like, to talk about their leadership journey. I've asked them to sort of focus on their journey through up into these national scientific societies and with experiences within them. And then I prepared some questions. So I have some particular questions for them, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Please use the Q&A function for any questions. I will read the questions aloud. If you'd like, you can sign your name and affiliation at the end of the question, or we also have the ability to unmute if you'd like to say your question aloud. I'm sure that we can make that happen. Just make a note of it. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Waller to talk about his experiences.
Great, thanks, Natalie. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here with Tom, who was my department chair as an assistant professor, and I made a big impact. I've always wanted to do the things he did, including some activities with the National Academies. So National Academies, there are 3 units: the National Academies of Science, National Academy of Engineering, and National Academy of Medicine. And many of you may have heard so-and-so has become a member of the National Academy of Sciences. It's a very big career honor. As a junior faculty member, I thought it was, an aspirational thing way down the road for just the senior people. And if they got together and wrote a report, it was probably pretty stuffy. I didn't aspire to do this till I learned a little more about it. And the National Academies are different than like the American Statistical Association or ENAR or the International Biometric Society, and then it's not a professional organization. I want to give you a little bit of background because I found out about this along the way as I got involved, but it's good to have a good sense of what the opportunities for statisticians and data science are. So first of all, they have a beautiful they have 2 buildings, both of them with interesting designs and artwork in them, mostly science-based art. This is the ceiling in the rotunda in the older building. And I borrowed this from Michelle Schwalbe, who's one of the staffers at the National Academies. So I'm currently, as Natalie said, I'm currently starting a second 3-year term as co-chair of the Committee on Applied and Theoretical Statistics, which is part of the Board of Mathematical Sciences and Analytics. I served 2 3-year terms on the board and just finished, so it should say ex-member here, but it just changed at the beginning of this month. And I'll say a little bit more about that. So the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine were founded by Abraham Lincoln in 1863. And a lot of times it sort of sounds like it's part of the government, but it's a nonprofit, nonpartisan, non-governmental institution. It's not funded by the government. It's not an agency of the government. It's not appointed by the government, but it's a set of experts to provide high quality, objective, evidence-based advice on science, engineering, and health matters. So it's in Washington, D.C., and there are close connections to Congress and staffers and policymakers and agencies, and I'll mention a little more about that. But it's a proud history from 1863, so the middle of the Civil War, founded by Abraham Lincoln, to have this independent collection. The kind of things that NASM, or National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, do. There's really sort of 4 levels sometimes. And if you get on the mailing list for CATS or some of the other ones, you can get opportunities. A lot of these are webinars or in person if you're in the DC area. So I'm going to start at the bottom. They may convene experts to talk about a relevant policy issue. And these would be webcast, and then the video is recorded on the National Academy site. There may be a collection of experts. It might be a roundtable. And that's where you would get people to share information, ideas, and generally it's without a written summary, although one of the most downloaded CATS ones is an ongoing roundtable about data science education at undergraduate level. And so they would get education and trainers and data scientists together. There's a lot of interesting material in that report. The step up from that is a workshop where you have experts talk about a difficult problem. They gather information, they have discussion, and there's a book written, but no recommendations given. It's just a summary of the positions made and the following discussion. The more in-depth one is an ongoing committee that'll meet probably multiple times over a couple of years to do what's called a consensus study. This will be, and sometimes this is written into legislation in Congress, that the National Academies will do a study on ongoing effects of Agent Orange in Vietnam veterans, or they're recently recruiting for a consensus study on health effects of the original Manhattan Project team. That includes a call for biostatisticians. They meet, the staffers help them put this, they can call in any experts they want. There's usually public sessions. If you have something, I think Tom was on a Gulf War syndrome consensus study when I was an assistant professor. And I was really impressed, and he had to read a lot because the joint printer had lots and lots of the draft reports, if I remember right. It's a peer-reviewed report at the end, so another way to participate is a peer reviewer of these final reports, and there are conclusions and findings. There's a very clear statement of work and deliverables. The National Academies also has two components to it. The one you hear about of somebody late in their career or mid-career being elected to the National Academies is an honor society type thing for their contributions to society, engineering, and medicine. There are several statisticians in the National Academy of Sciences, probably not as many as there should be, several in the National Academies of Engineering for those working in industrial engineering and so on. And several in the National Academies of Medicine. I think Tom's in the National Academy of Medicine, Du Bois-Bowman recently, Brahmer Mukherjee. So there are a lot of biostatisticians. Some people are in more than one. I think Zhihong Lin is in both the National Academies of Medicine and the National Academy of Science. So you are elected by current members. It's very competitive, limited number every year. And so it's a very high career honor. The National Academies also has the service activities of advising the nation, as I mentioned, was originally what it was set up for. So generally those workshops and consensus studies will include members of the societies, but people who aren't yet members can also serve on that. And most of my activities leading up to being on CATS were being a member of a consensus study on standoff explosive technology detection for airports, like the TSA, things you go through. And it was mostly physicists and chemists and a statistician, and really interesting work. So the statisticians you find in ongoing, there's some standing boards, and then there's the committees for the consensus studies and speakers at workshops and so on. They're the members of the National Academies. I mentioned statisticians there. There are expert members on those different activities, and there are also standing boards and committees. The Committee on National Statistics, I'm going to talk about three of these really briefly. The Committee on National Statistics tends to focus on national statistics like the Census, Bureau of Labor Statistics, ongoing measurements there. The Board on Math Sciences and Analytics is really an interesting group with some statistical connection because the Committee on Applied and Theoretical Statistics is underneath that. But it's also about math education, and I'll show some examples there. The Committee on Applied and Theoretical Statistics, because the Committee on National Statistics has a pretty clear and very busy docket working with official statistics, the Committee on Applied and Theoretical Statistics sort of does everything else. And to Konstantin Gatsonis' credit, he kind of revitalized this, and I was fortunate to be part of that as a member, as it started seeking out topics that weren't necessarily ongoing official statistics, but nonetheless had a very statistical flavor. So I'll show a couple of those really briefly. So these are, if you'd like the slides, feel free to email me because it has a link to the National Academies committees, or if you go to nationalacademies.org, it's pretty easy to find the different committees, and it'll show you who's currently on it, when their current meetings are, what webinars they have coming up, and they each have a mailing list that are really handy to get on. This committee develops studies in response to requests from federal agents and others to initiate studies to contribute to the effective of the federal statistical system, applications of statistical methods to better implement and evaluate federal programs, and improve the application of statistical methods to public affairs. The Board on Mathematical Sciences and Analytics strives to provide actionable mathematical advice to policymakers, strengthen connection between application areas of math, statistics, and data science, support the health of math science ecosystem and a robust educational pipeline, so as I mentioned, and public awareness of the role of mathematical sciences. One interesting comparison for me coming from biostatistics is I'm familiar with NIH and NSF funding. In the math world, there's a lot of Department of Energy and Department of Defense funding that there is in statistics as well, but not quite as much. And then CATS, the strategic goals are to translate advances in theoretical statistics and computation to application areas. So we want to put the A and the T together. Foster partnerships between statistics and other areas of intellectual inquiry. So we reach out to other boards like material science, geology, mining, and the others at the National Academies. We promote a scientifically principled development, use, and teaching of statistics and data science. We've all seen examples where everyone wants to do their own statistics, but they can do better with a statistical background, and improve the use of data and evidence to form decisions. Just as an example, it's not all just research. The Board on Math Sciences and Analytics and for 2 years, we debated these posters, illustrating math graphics on how math fits in. And there's the interconnectedness, but this comic strip one about math being the hero with crypto and optimizer, and it's a comic of ordering a pizza. It involves geometry and wavelets and cryptography and all of these things and optimization. This one really gave me the opportunity. I was invited to speak to all the K-12 math teachers in Georgia in their summer meeting because they loved this poster so much. So I spoke to 3,000 kindergarten to 12th grade math teachers, and they all got a copy of this poster. So there is a QR code if you'd like, and there's a whole bunch of posters. The reports that come out, CNStat has things about the census, as I mentioned, as you might expect. They have an ongoing series of reports on principles and practices for a federal statistical agency. This is the 7th edition. They do more than just these official statistics, but these are some of the more recent ones. Board on Math Sciences was looking at very recently artificial intelligence, doing AI proofs of mathematical theorems. So this is a really interesting one. Risk analysis methods for nuclear war and nuclear terrorism. This includes both a classified and non-classified component. And then we collect a lot of biomedical data. What are we going to do with it long term? This fits in with NIH's data sharing policy and so on. And also, what does it cost to store all that? And finally, CATS, here's the roundtable on data science, post-secondary education, automated research workflows for accelerated discovery. And then one of my favorites was the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association came to us with a bunch of video of fish trawls on how much bycatch is a fish going, fisherman's boat getting, and whether it's in compliance. And when you send an observer along, they change their behavior. So they wanted to see if they could identify the species. So they had hours and hours and hours of high resolution video. We did a workshop putting them together with computer vision people, and they loved it. It spurred a whole set of funding that they had, and they made data sets available. And so one of the funnest things is sitting around with a collection of really smart statisticians with a problem pitched in front of you and come up with solutions. So it's a way to provide and help build a network of advice for these kind of policies. So that's a whirlwind tour of the National Academies statistical activities. Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you, Professor Waller. Great. Okay, so Professor Lewis.
Well, Lance, as usual, is a hard act to follow, but I'll try. I don't have visuals, but for AAAS, you can go to AAAS.org and find out everything. First, I'll say that it's a pleasure to be here. I've listened to one or two of the other webinars, and they're really excellent, so I recommend those, and hopefully we can recommend ours. Just a little background on me. From the start, when I got in as an undergraduate even, was interested in theory and methods, whether it be math or eventually statistics. And their service to applications, but then the reverse flow also of the applications as the generator of relevant theory and methods. And that's certainly been a theme for my professional life. Natalie already listed my sequence of events, of positions, so I won't bother doing that. But I will say that each one has been sort of logical, but it's also exposed me to a whole variety of different statistical viewpoints and organizational structures and cultures. And that has definitely helped. One more quick thing on me, we don't want to make it all about me, that service has always been a big part of my professional profile. It's kind of in my nature. It's educational. It creates valuable connections, and you can think of that as gaming the system, or that they're just a value in their own right, which is the way I look at it. And they're otherwise rewarding. It's the hackneyed phrase, but it's quite true that you get more than you give. And for me, and looking back, I think this was true. I don't think I explicitly identified it as I was going along, and that is volunteering and service. It balances the I, me culture of academe with a healthy dose of us. And that has been, for me, very gratifying. The AAAS, it's the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And it really does, by a variety of methods, not only try to, but indeed advance science. It was founded in 1848, not terribly different from the founding of the National Academies. And the mission was, and is still, to advance science, engineering, and innovation through the world for the benefit of all, with the tagline being advancing science, serving society. Hard to argue with that, I think. Well, I think there are some who might, but I won't. there are 24 disciplinary sections with names, but also letters, and the letters are in the order of the order that they were founded. So math, for example, is section A. Statistics is section U, and if I counted correctly, I think that's the 21st one formed, and it was formed in 1962. There's a whole list of them, and just a few minutes ago, I had the web page up and I lost it. And one of the things about the AAAS website that I keep finding is its search engine isn't as great as you might like it to be. But you can imagine there's engineering, there's neuroscience, there's atmospherics, there's earth sciences, and a whole variety of science ones, with a few left to go at least until they're going to use up the 26, excuse me. But each one coalesced possibly from earlier ones when there's a critical mass of people who want to have an identity with a specific section, with many people jointly members of more than one section. The organization publishes Science magazine. I suppose that's the most well-known if you know anything about it. Other journals and newsletters. And I highly recommend that people look at science. You'll find that depending on your interest and background, 80%, maybe even 90% of the content will be a mystery. But there'll always be several articles, and certainly the front end, which is kind of the news section with capsule reports on various things, is very educational, if for no other reason to get to understand the breadth and depth of science, quite frankly. The organization advocates for STEM and other disciplines. It has a lot of educational activities. And the annual meeting is an agora of interests and foci and cultures. And it's really worth going, both for the technical side or the scientific side, whether it be technical or not, but also just to go to sessions, meet people from different scientific cultures, let alone nations and locations, and gives you a feel for the breadth and depth of science that I think is hard to get by not going and embedding yourself in it, even if that's all you ever do in the thing. I chaired section U, the statistics one, in 2012, with the usual sequence of chair-elect in 2011 and past chair, or whatever it's called, in 2013. So my news is a bit old, but I think it stays pretty constant. That the section's goals then and now, and certainly mine, were to elevate the visibility and role of statistics in the AAAS and in science more generally. I'm using the word statistics as a shorthand for statistics and data science. Please allow me to do that. As with all the sections, there's chair, secretary, some members at large, council delegates, and so each section, section U included, has a vote or votes and membership on the overall council. And we have a nominating committee. The section has a nominating committee for the next wave of offices. So the section participates in council meetings. There's an annual meeting of the section chairs, and I'll get to that when we get to the specific question responses that we have. There's a lot of collaboration with other sections on proposing sessions for the annual meeting and co-sponsoring of them, partially with money, but mostly just with sort of moral force that they're good to have. The section every year has to nominate, or does nominate, new fellows, so that each section gets a certain number of AAAS fellows. Some are automatic depending on the size of the section, in that if you put them in, they'll be elected. And then you get a chance to do others that, if you'd like, the case has to be made in competition with other nominations. There are travel awards. There are actually, one of the nice things about that annual meeting is that local students are brought in to serve as session aides and do things that also get to come to the meeting for free. And every year at the annual meeting, and it's something that maybe we, quote unquote, statistics groups could think of, and that is they have a family science day, where there's a day at the meeting when families, you have to pre-register, but can come in without paying any fees. There are several exhibits set up in the exhibit hall and little tutorials set up for children and adults, quite frankly, ranging from late grade school up through college and so on. I've taken my grandchildren to a few. It's actually a wonderful event. And so I'm going to leave it there and save the rest of it, what I would say, for answers to the moderated Q&A, and we'll turn it back over.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, there's a lot of things there. I, don't always realize all the things that are going on behind the website. And forgive me because I am going to bop around a little bit with the questions I sent. But is there anything you've done as part of this organization which you've been particularly proud? I'm curious, in terms of what you've achieved, Lance right now, and Tom before or since, but.
I think one of the things we like best is connecting these agencies that have a question with a group of people who can help them out. I mentioned the fisheries example, which may sound like kind of an odd little connection, but they had a problem. They had a bunch of data they didn't know what to do with, and they were happy with the individual and the types of people we connected them with. So that really felt great. The other one I would say is we've been trying to, and this ties to Tom's point, we've been proposing invited sessions for the AAAS meeting, ENAR meeting, and ASA meeting. And the last AAAS meeting in 2023, we had a moderated discussion on AI equity and fairness. And we had a range from Joe Gastworth, who's done legal statistics for a long, long time, to junior or mid-career experts in AI, and they had a lot of Q&A from the audience. It was well attended. And at the ASA meeting, we had a panel discussion on the frontiers of statistics, featuring Sally Keller, Deb Nolan, Du Bois Bowman, and it led to a good discussion of how do we recognize new directions of excellence. And we were using that a little bit strategically to try to get support for a consensus study on the area from the National Science Foundation and National Security Agency, and a couple of other agencies are interested in teaming together to put together one of those consensus study reports that can serve as a guideline for the field. So if that all comes together, we would be really, really proud of it. But so far, we've gotten some really good response. So there's work to do, but so that's really fun as you're connected and where your field is going.
Definitely. Tom?
Yeah, first, I might add something as an accomplishment for CATS, because I was on it quite a while ago, and it was, I'll call it kind of a mathematical statistical backwater. It wasn't doing anything very interesting. I'll take partial credit for that. I wasn't chair, but I think it's become vibrant and highly relevant. And CNStat can't just sit back and say they're the only productive statistical group at the National Academy. It's very pleasing to see that. So on to AAAS, I think a couple of the accomplishments that I was at least associated with in the 2011 through 13 sequence were that it's still a very hierarchical organization, but back then it was really, the chairs would get together and we just think that the leadership thinks of the sections as just a nuisance. Yes, they have to be involved, they have to be asked for input and so on, but let's just not let it bother us too much. And I think we really did quite forcefully get the leadership to realize it wasn't so much whining that we want to be involved, but it actually will produce better meetings if you take seriously our proposals. And I think it's come a long way to at least make it participatory. That's one I'll say I helped with. Also, one that it was quite surprising to see that if you were to look at the profile, if you were a member of the whole thing, you don't have to be necessarily on a chair of your profile, there was no checkbox to put statistician. You could put mathematician, sociologist, whatever else, but I'll take at least partial credit for having gotten statistician to be a checkbox in a profile for a member, let alone anything else. turns out, happily, luckily, 2012 was, if you do the math, the 50th anniversary of Section U. And so we got a chance to show off a little bit. We had at the meetings buttons. I think I still have one. I can't find it, or I would have put it up. And we're given at least a little more leverage on sessions. Marie Davidian, who was at that point ASA president, or in one of the sequence anyway, she and I wrote a editorial for Science Magazine, one of those one-pagers called Why Statistics. And I have to say, it's one of those where trying to be brief and still get the point across is very challenging. You get no more than one page. And it was a lot of to and fro, not so much that they wanted to change what we were saying, but to make our writing much more efficient. So that we feel quite proud of. If you go back in a 2012 issue of Science and look at it, it still, I think, makes points that are worth making more generally. And the fact that we had statisticians writing one of the one-pagers, one per issue, feels pretty good. We proposed, as one of our proposals for the annual meeting sessions, Hans Rosling, who sadly is deceased, but a demographer, a person who was predicting that world population will not continue to increase. Not only did they take it, but he ended up being one of the keynote speakers. And so I think it was an example of bringing something up that the leadership would not have thought of probably. And yet it was a great talk where he did his, in a sense, usual thing of having rolls of toilet paper where he'd start building histograms and watch things happening. And then finally, the more general thing, I think we, the section, but also always importantly, working with other sections, elevated the visibility and role of statistics in a good way, not saying, oh my God, they're highly visible and we can't stand them, but in a good way. There's always work to be done there. It's a very heterogeneous society. I'll wait for other questions to answer some of that.
Great. So feel free to the audience members to put questions in the Q&A. I've got a few more, but we can start populating those as folks have them. So one question I have, us as individuals, right? We have finite bandwidth, and so there's an opportunity. You can get very involved in your statistical societies. You can get very involved in these national scientific societies. I mean, how have you viewed kind of your effort along the way, your path along the way, and your sort of shifting roles, and how much you have taken on with these societies? I'm going a little off script, but this is what I do. But I mean, I guess it relates to my question. Why is it important, or is it important for statisticians to get involved in these types of organizations? And you as an individual with only so much bandwidth, how do you view those things in any tension?
You want to do me first, Lance? Well, Lance is doing first. You're good at it, so why don't you?
Oh, go ahead. I have finite bandwidth, Tom.
Maybe you don't have finite bandwidth. I don't know.
Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, you want me to go? I'm sorry. Okay. First of all, part of your question, at least initially, I think, was why would a statistician get involved in those? And I think the answer is that you probably shouldn't early on in your career. And I don't mean you shouldn't be interested, but in terms of dedicating time, at least with the current scoring system in academia, and I think elsewhere, spend your time early on, at least volunteering in the more homogeneous, if I could use that word, statistical enterprises. But as you get older and maybe brain cells start going away or whatever it might be, start thinking about volunteering in a more broad arena. And exactly when that should be, I think, just depends on the person. I don't want to ever tell a faculty member or a colleague or a mentee, oh, don't do that. If you're really excited about doing it, do it. Keep it in mind that you're not the old epidemiologic approximation that prevalence equals incidence times mean duration. And so you don't want to look up and have 50 of these commitments because the incidence hasn't stopped and the mean duration is infinity or something like that. But other than that, answering the more specific question, I think it's important for us statisticians to get involved. We need to be at the table, we're not in the gallery. You don't have much leverage if you're simply in the commentariat, as opposed to if you'd like putting yourself a bit on your discipline a bit on the line. We need the visibility, and I'll say the leverage in that sense. And I'll close with one phrase, which is that the respect given to statisticians and statistics will be no greater than the respect that we communicate. And it's very difficult, again, to communicate that effectively without being part of the club, basically.
There's some good quotes here. I'm writing these down.
Yeah,
Okay, Lance.
I think that's really good advice. And I do think there are a lot of ways to get involved in, say, ENAR or WNAR and ASA sections early in your career, where you're with people kind of doing similar work to you. And that's a good networking way to build up. And in the assistant professor, for those on sort of a tenure track path, it does help you get known and to know people, to see the kind of things that get done. And somebody who works with you on a committee and sees that you've put in time to do what you were supposed to do, those can all show up in your evaluation letters and so on. It also puts you in a broader network. Some of these National Academy committees, this wasn't till mid-career I was asked to sit on one, and it was eye-opening. And you are taking time away from other things, and you want to make sure you're going to participate. So like Tom said, to be recognized at the table, it's helpful for them to see that you're listening, you've done the background reading, you are contributing, and you're contributing what you feel you have to offer. I think Tom's point about the respect given and taken is a good one. And I also think there's a certain, academics doesn't really foster a lot of humility, but I do think in an interdisciplinary, when you're working with people who are all at the top of their game, there's a certain amount of humility too, that doesn't mean they understand type 1 and type 2 error or power even.
Thank goodness. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I was prepared for one, and I thought I was ready to go with sensitivity, specificity, and Bayes' theorem. And they basically told us at the beginning, we know sensitivity, specificity, and Bayes' theorem. What else you got? So they do require some creativity. I mentioned the explosives detection technology. When I sat down, the person next to me said, I smell chemists. I said, I'm just a statistician. I always smell this way. I don't know. You have something to offer. And when you contribute to one, I think my experience has been I get asked to do other things because I'm willing to think out of my own box and try to contribute to the answer that, the question at hand. So what does explosives technology detection have to do with cancer around nuclear power plants? Well, it was somebody who said, you have questions, you have data, and here's how we put questions and data together to see what's possible to do and what might not be possible to do, or you might need to do this. And the staff members and the chairs of these departments remember who's helpful and who's kind of showing off their own expertise without listening to the others. So I do think you have to go in it in a collaborative sense, and statisticians are well positioned for that. We often work with people with data, and we're trying to answer questions from imperfect and noisy data, and that gives us a leg up on some of the discipline-specific people. So we do belong at that table, but sometimes we have to do a little self-advocacy in the discussions to make sure your questions come up to you. So there's a humility and there's a leadership component. You're representing your skills and your field at addressing a very hard problem for which there may not be an easy answer. So I love being in those kind of discussions, and so I get a lot out of participating in these committees. I come back excited, like, oh, I think our field's going to be doing these kind of things, and I'm not always right, but when I was department chair and came back from a CATS meeting, I would list all the new stuff we needed to do, and that people kind of just added it to the list. But it's motivating. You're helping other people out, but it definitely gives you new ideas. So there is definitely a benefit if you're listening.
Let me add one more thing. It's really more with the National Academy and other things than with AAAS, but it's helped me learn the importance of what I've called level to zero design, how important it is to have the right team together. to address a problem. And that anything that is anything other than trivial needs multiple disciplines. And being a National Academy panel or other things like that, AAAS panels and workshops, and you could name the list, you get a good feel for why a certain field or kind of person is needed. And I brought that home to various departments about, well, we're not going to be involved in that unless we also have the following skill sets, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, did you want to add something, Lance?
No, just that's a good point. I agree.
Great. Okay, so so I'm hearing a lot of interesting like advantages of being involved in these types of organizations. There's the service component, the sort of the we component. There's the networking component. There's and being able to sort of see where the future directions of science and see where things are heading, have that sort of bird's eye view of things. There's a comment from Madeline Bauer in the chat, not a question, a comment, as Lance just said. We as statisticians also get a lot from working with other scientists in other fields, so it's that sort of exposure. I'm interested to know if there's sort of other specific things that where the organizations can support statisticians, like support the societies. Were there specific ways that you felt that you were able to use your work with that group to sort of directly support statisticians, like the field in general?
Let me start by saying it's hard for me to think of anything, at least with the AAAS Section U, other than having sessions and speakers invited who were statisticians and would not only be at the meetings, but generate eventually articles and such things. But I think the general knowledge of that I've mentioned, and Lance has too, of learning about the broad array of possibilities, bringing that back home, if you'd like, and not necessarily having everything on Lance's list get done, but a few of them maybe saying, you know, here's something we ought to think about doing, was for me maybe the most proximal kind of thing, as opposed to training or something.
Yeah, I always think it's helpful to talk to people from other departments, even if it's another statistics or biostatistics department, and see what ideas they have. You know, I think trying to identify directions where we have good ideas that can contribute, we have to have our eyes and ears open for those. And so I do think that's helpful. Like the Frontiers of Statistics, if this goes forward as a consensus study, there'll be a committee to work on it. They won't all be statisticians. We'll want to get not only just friendly voices from other fields, but fields that say, we need help with this, we need help with that. And getting the right people on that committee so that the discussion goes forward is can be challenging, but it's worth the effort. And what the audit members attending today can do is there will be public meetings and webinars on the Frontiers of Statistics. And to the question about how you can volunteer, one is to reach out to the staffers or the chairs of the current committee. We usually keep a list of people who've expressed interest. It doesn't mean we can get to everybody all the time. There's a balancing fields, and we need to have a certain number of members of the academies on there. But if you attend these sessions about Frontiers of Statistics and ask questions and keep up with what's going on, it can be helpful because your name will get in the general discussion. There's fast networking and slow networking, I think, or a whole continuum. But a lot of times you think, I want to meet the person that did this and the person that did this. But sometimes just showing up will have benefits 2 or 3 or 5 years down the road. And people remember those who are, you know, thoughtfully contributing to things. And, you know, so I think part of life is showing up and expressing some interest and being, you know, you can be critical, but constructive criticism is helpful. And also picking up the ideas of where else to talk to people next. So I'm an advocate of sort of the playing the long game on some of these things too. But let people know you have interest. I'd say some of the people that we have nominated for CATS and considered for CATS are people who came up to myself or Nick Horton or Liz Stewart and said they would like to get involved. And that doesn't mean it's an automatic, you know, network or backroom deal. It's just the people who make the decisions are pretty broadly networked, and you want to have a connection in there. So it's helpful even if the payoff's not immediate.
Yeah, and I'll just add, maybe it's not saying anything terribly different, but if you've ever been involved in editing a journal, one of the challenges is who should be the AEs? Oh, who should be the referees? Section U of AAAS, who should we encourage to run for office? Who should we encourage to do this and that? And names come up because you've met them or they've been in a session and so on. And so it may sound a little manipulative, and it is a little bit, but if you are interested in that kind of a life as part of what you do, it's not going to happen magically without somebody knowing of you, at least.
Yeah, for instance, I have a copy of a book a colleague of mine wrote and sent me a copy, and inside they wrote, so the setup for this is when you go to the American Statistical Association joint statistical meetings, it's a lot of people, but you end up with the same 15 people because you have common interests or so. This is an individual who said they found it oddly comforting for me to be in the audience of their talks. And that meant I was going to ask questions. I wasn't necessarily challenging them. I expressed real interest in what they were doing. And I think we all kind of gravitate towards individuals who are available, ask questions, and you can tell they're listening. So I do think there's a big value in letting people know that you think they did interesting work. I may not ask in the session, but I might hang around afterwards and say, oh, that's really cool. Where can I find your paper? Or have you thought about adding this to it? And some of those comments you make years later, somebody might remind you of, and you've forgotten. So, don't hold back on compliments and interest as well, I'd say.
Yeah, that's very nice. I co-teach a statistical practice class, and we recently had a lecture about professionalism, like, right, being a good listener and expressing enthusiasm and interest. And I will also say that Lance, when I was a graduate student, I reached out to Lance to ask for some of his time, some of his advice. So you've always been very generous with your time.
Yeah, I think the advice for department chairs is recruiting is never done. You may not hire them this round, but you may hire that person 5 years from now. So
good. So Lance, I have a question about the National Academy. So who kind of decides what some of the priorities are in terms of the projects? Where does that come from? Does that come from above?
It's a little bit of both. I think Tom was talking about the revitalization of CATS. I think one of the things Konstantin Gatsotis did as chair was he chose people he wanted, and he actively encouraged us to come up with ideas. So generally there's something we're after. The frontiers of statistics is something we're interested in. We think NSF would be interested in it, so we've been pitching it to NSF and NIH. So we do have to think who would want to sponsor this, especially a consensus study, because it's going to add up with travel and publishing costs and so on. But sometimes things are written into the law. A recent example was it's good the National Academies are nonpartisan, non-governmental, but that doesn't mean the requests are nonpartisan. So for instance, there was recently a consensus study reevaluating clean air standard requirements, and that's fraught with political opinion and so on. So CATS is one of the sponsors of this. Liz Stewart was the chair of that committee. And we thought long and hard and very carefully about who's doing good science in this area, and making sure we were balancing the types of science that went into it, because some of the motivation for it was, oh, these are uncertain estimates, we can't rely on them. The National Academies needs to do a study and show this. Well, we're not told what to find, we're told what the topic is. We work with the committees, and usually it's a couple of boards and the staffers writing up the statement of work to make sure it meets the language of this is, gets to be very wonky at a point, but trying to get at the essence of what the question is, and then work carefully to make sure that committee has the expertise, the experience, and the maturity, for lack of a better word, to go into a difficult area and try to do the best science. So that separation is real, but sometimes you are assigned topics that come out of a very political discussion. Some of them have pretty difficult public meetings. I've been involved in a couple of environmental health ones, and the neighbors of the pollution source have very strong feelings. The parents of children who have cancer, it's a very emotional, personal experience to them. Tom's had experience with the Gulf War syndromes. People were suffering from a health condition. You can't dismiss that. And so there is a very difficult component that, it's tough to be trained on empathetic communication in a science framework. And those kind of skills are also taken into consideration, as well as someone's CV and publications. So
let me add a little bit, not much, but and it gets back to my learning about how to organize things. In 2011, I think it was, COPSS actually contracted to put a committee together to look at the methods and pluses and minuses of various hospital profiling methods. And a committee of one person from each of the COPSS society, and then for whatever reason, I chaired it as the sixth wheel or whatever. We actually, right from the start, decided to copy completely the National Academies method of no bias, of making sure that we had external reviewers eventually that were anonymous. Chi-Hong sort of chaired that operation, and it was another not as hot a political thing as Lentz was describing, but pretty political. And I think if we hadn't kind of learned, just in this case, the bureaucracy from the National Academies, we wouldn't have done it as well in the process sense. We'll let others decide whether we did it well in what our report says.
Yeah, there's
yeah,
something.
and I would just put in a plug for the National Academies staffers, the people that work there and work on study after study after study. They're very good at writing. They're very good at organizing. They're very good at the herding of cats. You might not our acronym.
The other kind, yeah.
Yeah, the herding of academics that I'm sure everyone on the call can appreciate is a challenge. So that's a very impressive collection of people, and it's just always a pleasure to work with them every time.
Well, I will say, I mean, right now we are within a few weeks, you'll be able to see the report of the committee, the panel on the quality of the 2020 census. I don't think it's revealing much to say it's about 545 pages long. And the staff are like they're gods and goddesses. It's amazing how much work they put in. I mean, the panel, we did a lot, there's no doubt about it, but they get the report together.
And for those of you early in your career, these National Academies reports that are available online, you can read them or download the PDF. It's a wealth of knowledge. I didn't ever think of looking at them as a source early in my career because I thought it was just people pontificating, and that was totally wrong. They're very clearly written, they're well sourced, and if you want to see like the top, people who really know a topic putting their information together in the summary, these are really good resources. They capture a moment in time where the people working on all the parts got together and said, this is what we think the relevant work is. So I've since then kind of used those every once in a while as touchstone kind of references for the importance of a topic, the multifaceted and interdisciplinary part of a topic. So I've learned a lot about the reports and from the reports.
So Natalie, would it be good? You had a question, which was advice on those looking to get more involved, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, be a perfect.
Is that a good one to end with maybe? Or?
I think it's perfect. Yeah. So we've talked about it a little bit throughout the way, but we're going to wrap up now. And so I want to give each of our experts a chance to provide any advice to folks about sort of ways to get involved, or also sort of skills folks may want to work on if this is something that they aspire to be involved with. Whoever would like to go first.
I will not repeat the things we've already said, which I think we've said most of it, but I'll add, get to know the society or the organization. They've got websites, skim the journal or journals if they have it. As Lance just said, maybe go to the National Academy website and pull down for free a few of the relevant PDFs. If it's a place that has journal, try to volunteer to be a referee or some other thing. Attend an annual meeting or two or smaller events to get a feel for the culture and so things. And then at least for the ones that are more broadly science and policy, not necessarily focused on statistics, don't expect instantaneous influence, although maybe now that the field is getting more involved, it's becoming easier. But statistics isn't the main focus of the society or the organization. So be ready for it to be taking a little work to get your credibility going. And therefore, promote statistical thinking and also methods, but more the statistical thinking. And I'll close with no whining. No Rodney Dangerfield. We ain't getting no respect. Go earn the respect.
Great. Lance?
That's really good advice. For the National Academies, since it's a little different than a professional society, I'd say these meetings and workshops used to be kind of only in person and only for those in the DC area. Now that they're going to be virtual and they're recorded and stored, spending some time looking up what kind of topics have been covered by, you can either go to the committee sites of CNStat or CATS or the Board on Math Science and Analytics and see what past activities they have, or just search the Academy site. Sometimes you'll find a report from 15 years ago. And like I said, it's a snapshot in time of thinking at that time. It can be a good background reference for a grant or a review. Look at the membership on the committees. If there's people let them know you'd be interested, kind of float that. And I'll just, it won't happen right away, but let people know you're interested in that sort of thing. And CATS sponsors a public symposium every June, and we pick the topic on that. And we did Frontiers again. This is kind of our Frontiers year to kind of get people connected to it. But that's usually has some great speakers and great discussion. It's in person and usually in person in DC, but it'll be webcast. And we had, 100 people watching before. So if we choose a good topic, we'll have a good audience. But if you want to get more involved, I'd say get familiar with the kind of things they do there. And like Tom said, no whining. You belong at the table, and but you don't know everything. So also another practice early in the career is when you go to a conference, go to a session you don't know anything about. See who's there. See, there is statistics involved, so you'll have some comment. I used to try to do that with, just something I thought sounded interesting, but I didn't have any background in astrostatistics or something. So, go kind of expose yourself to the world of it, because these kind of committees want broad thinking. It's good you have your specialty, but you want to see how it fits.
Right. Yeah, there's a wide world of science out there. So thank you so much to our two experts. Thank you to COPSS and NISS, particularly to Amita Manatunga, Jim Rosenberger, and Megan Glenn. Thank you to the wonderful audience for listening. If you found this helpful, a recording will be posted on the website. You can share it on YouTube, share the link. And stay tuned for more events. We have some great events coming up in October and November. And thank you. We'll wrap up there. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.